Hello and welcome to part 4 of the Quadratrac rebuild series. In part 5 we will actually finish building the main transfer case. That will be quite a long video, so in hopes of keeping the length of that video a little shorter, in this video, part 4, we'll go through all the parts that we're going to use in that rebuild. There's a bit more to talk about than there was for the low range rebuild in part 3. Those are mostly standard parts, so I just showed you those as I installed them. For the other rebuild, like I say, there's a good bit more to talk about, so we'll try to get all that out of the way so we can go a little more quickly through the rebuild in the next video. So as far as a source for parts for this rebuild, BJ's Off-Road in Gig Harbor, Washington is, if there's a center of the Quadratrac universe, then it's BJ's. So I'll mention them several times, and I'll just say that I'm not affiliated with BJ's other than being a customer. So I paid for all the things that you see here with my own money, so you get that out of the way. And let's begin by starting with the most difficult parts first. So this is the annular deep groove ball bearing that goes for the both front and rear output shafts here. And this is an unusual bearing in that it is essentially metric or imperial units, or not imperial, metric or international units on the ID. So what that means is it is 30 millimeter, and then the OD is either customary here in the US or imperial in the UK, depending on where you are in the world, and it measures right at just a hair, literally a hair's width under 2.5 inches. There we go. 2.496 or 7. And the reason for that is the bores in the transfer case where these go. Right in here, measure 2.5 inches. So these are intended then to drop into that 2.5 inch bore. The problem is that's not a standard bearing, and so they're not available anymore. The original factory bearing was a Federal, a 1206 FC. So these are essentially unavailable. You can't really buy these, and so it's a bit of a problem. This is probably okay to reuse, but I don't have enough bearings to rebuild the current cases that I'm rebuilding, so it's a problem. I've already mentioned BJ's Off-Road. On their website they have indicated that they will likely come up with a replacement bearing for these sometime this year. Well, we're at toward the end of 2022 now, and I haven't seen any announcements that they've made any progress in reintroducing these bearings, and so I felt like I can't wait much longer, so I'll do something different. Also just mention that, of course, in this video a lot of the information may change over the years, could change pretty rapidly, so that's why I want to put it all in one video, and maybe I can update it or replace it later if the situation changes for replacement parts for these cases. So anyway, so what I did is I worked with a US manufacturer of bearings, and what I had them do is take a 6206Z bearing, and that has the correct 30 millimeter ID as a standard bearing. The Z means that it has a shield on one side and it's open on the other side. And then what they're doing is they're press fitting a sleeve. This measures, well, I don't have a 6206 to show you, but it's smaller than the 2.497 or so inch that we need. So they're going to make a nice sleeve, press fit. This will be an interference fit, and it'll make this OD then correct. Those are on the way now. That's actually what I've been waiting on to finally build the case. So when those arrive, I'll inspect them and report back, and we'll go ahead and build the case, assuming they work out okay. I'm not entirely certain, but if you look closely, there's a little line here on the standard paddle bearings. It almost looks like this is a sleeved bearing anyway, but I'm not 100% sure. If anyone else knows more about that, please drop it in the comments. So that's that non-standard bearing. And the second non-standard bearing is actually not found inside the transfer case at all. This is the transmission tail shaft adapter that on one side bolts to the Turbo 400 automatic transmission, and on this side to the Quadratrac, the front half of the case. So this bearing sticks out a little bit from the housing adapter, and it has a snap ring that locates it there. I'll show you that better in a minute. And in this, there's a recess here that the bearing fits into, and then a recess there that the snap ring fits into, and that's what locates the bearing between the two pieces when they go together, like this. So this bearing is not a press fit. It should just fit snugly into this tail housing adapter. So you might need to push it out if it's been in there a while. This one is bearing is all bound up. It's no good. But you can either just press. This one's a little tight, so you may have to use a driver to drive it out. And I've read on internet forums or what have you that this bearing is basically unobtainable, unobtainium, very difficult to find, but that's actually not the case. It's actually readily available. It is a non-standard bearing. It's called has what's called a 308 style bearing outer diameter, which is 90 millimeter. Right. And then a 307 type bearing ID, which is 35 millimeter. I don't know if I captured that OD on camera. So there it is, 90 millimeter. And then it's 20 millimeters thick. And anyway, this is available from Advanced Adapters, so no problem there. I will put the part number here, but anyway, they actually just recently bought 2 or 3 of these. They had them in stock, shipped right away. So anyway, these bearings are available. They come with the snap ring already installed. So really just pop this one out, pop this one in, and as I understand it, well, what this bearing does is it supports the relatively long tail shaft coming out of the Turbo 400 that passes all the way through the Quadratrac for the low range unit. So it needs since it's long, it needs a bit of support, and that's the purpose of this bearing. And it's lubricated by, as I understand, transmission fluid. So on this side, transmission fluid runs into this area, lubricates this bearing, and then there's a gasket seal to keep that from leaking out this side. And then if you remember, we had 2 seals on the transfer case housing. When we took those out, there's actually 2 seals. So one faces out, I assume, to keep the transmission fluid out of the transfer case, and one faces in to keep the transfer case fluid in the transfer case. So okay, that's it for then the non-standard bearings for now. And there are 4 more bearings in the case that you can replace. I'll talk about those next. So these are the the old bearings we took out in part 2 of the series. There's 3 of this size and then 1 of this large size. And the small ones original were Torrington. And it's a B3416. And from BJ's, you can find replacements. These are standard bearings. You can also find them other places. I like to get mine at BJ's, and I'll explain that. So BJ's calls that their part number QT11. You can order them individually. And what it actually is a, here we go, yeah, Koyo B3416, and you can use that number then to cross-reference any other branded bearing you like. I would choose the Koyos anyway, and that's what BJ sells, so their prices are reasonable, they're good, so I just buy these from BJ's, and have 3 of those ready for the rebuild. The large needle bearing also was a Torrington. And that's a B4416. The replacement for that also from BJ's. Right. Also a Koyo brand. And B4416. So same. And so anyway, those are the replacement bearings. If you prefer a different brand, you can cross-reference those numbers. They're standard, so no big deal there. So that covers all the bearings. Let me set up a bit differently, and then we'll talk about a few more things. In part 2 of the series, I gave some wrong information, and you guys let me get away with it. I held up the front and rear output shafts up to the camera and said, see, they're basically the same. In fact, they're not. So what you find sometimes in these cases is that the rear spline count is usually 10 spline like this, and usually the front output shaft is also 10 spline like this, but occasionally it's 26 spline like this one, and I didn't catch that until I was editing. Anyway, so I just pointed out because this is what you're going to typically find is a different front output shaft. There's 10 splines, but occasionally you'll get a 26 spline in these, and I'm not sure if that corresponds to certain years of manufacture or what, but either way, if you need to, for example, order a new yoke, then just make sure you know your spline count before you place the order. And then since we talk about that, let's talk about the yokes. There's a couple different varieties. So this is an old rear output yoke. See, it has 10 splines. And this is a 1310 single joint for the rear drive shaft. So this seems to be the standard that comes for the rear. My Jeep's lifted, it's pretty typical, and in those cases, in a CJ7, the drive shaft is pretty short, so you end up switching to a double Cardan type joint, and this what we have here is, in this case, 26 spline inner, but a double Cardan style bolt pattern, and The double Cardan is not the same as the single 1310. They're slightly different. They don't quite line up. And so since I have a double Cardan on the drive shaft on the rear, I have to switch to this kind. And I always try to run 10 spline output shafts front and rear, so that way my yokes will fit either front or rear. They're both double Cardan. At least the CJs came double Cardan drive shaft from the factory for the full-time four-wheel drive. So anyway, I have a couple of yokes here ready to install. This is the old one that came off the front of a case. It's an original Spicer yoke. I've just painted with some caliper paint, so that one's 10 spline. And that's what we'll install in the next video. And then this one, because I needed to replace the rear and I didn't have another double Cardan style, I bought this one from Tom Wood's Driveshaft. So they're readily available there. I'll put the part number here, and this happens to be 10 spline double Cardan. They also have all permutations, so they have 10 spline and 26 spline in both single 1310 U-joint or double Cardan style, so you can get whatever flavor you need. So I'll put the part number for 10 spline double Cardan. You can find the rest from there. And then continuing to talk about the yokes. One thing that's nice about BJ's is they offer a lot of the small parts, so you can order just what you need a lot of times. So once the yoke is assembled to the output shaft, here's an old the old rubber seal, and it keeps the fluid inside the case. And those are available separately from BJ's, QT19, and they also come in the seal kit that BJ sells. Then up next is the washer for that. Compresses the seal, holds the yoke on. It's the old one. If for some reason you need a replacement those for that, BJ's has those as well, QT16 on their website. And then after that, of course, goes the lock nut. This is old crown style lock nut. And they sell a replacement for that as well. QT17. This is interrupted thread style, so the top couple of threads on the nut are deformed a little bit, and that's what locks this one on. That should work well. So then I think that's it for the bearings and the yokes. So I'm going to set up again, and I'll be right back. Okay, now let's talk about some of the obsolete hard parts for the transfer case, and we'll start with the chain. This is the one we took out in part 2 of the series. The original chains were Morse chains, and Morse is still making chains, but not this one anymore. So you see that it's stamped Morse on some of the links there. But anyway, several years ago, Morse stopped making these chains, and there was really not another workable source for these. And that sort of meant the end of the road for the Quadratrac transfer case without chains. Everybody was looking at swapping in a different transfer case. And of course, since it's full-time four-wheel drive, most people would swap to a part-time four-wheel drive, and that would require changing the adding lockout hubs to the front axle. So, you know, it was somewhat involved. Now, Crown Automotive does make a chain for these transfer cases. The story on that is that they're fairly low quality and can wear out in just a few thousand miles even. Luckily, I've never had to try out one myself. I bought probably one of the last remaining Morse chains several years ago, and that's what I'm running in the Jeep currently. But it's starting to stretch, and so I was looking at my options, and this is where BJ's really comes into play for the Quadratrac community. They worked with a manufacturer to reproduce a brand new chain, made in the US, high quality, and here that is. Alright, so brand new chain, and then lets us, those of us with Quadratracs, run a bit longer. And hopefully they continue to make these chains, because it's really about your only option. So good job, BJs. Thanks for stepping up and making that happen. Along the same lines, the friction cones that we talked about in the part 2 of the series, where the inner splines on the friction cones wear out. See, those are nearly gone. And so BJ stepped up again and worked with the manufacturer, and now makes new brake cones, clutch cones, friction cones, whatever you want to call them. Now, the cones were never meant to be replaced in the differential as a separate unit. From Jeep, you just got the full differential unit with the cones in it. So I haven't tried this yet, so I will install these cones. I'll run them, and also the new chain. And never tried one of those, but I'll get all this installed and run it. And if I have any problems, I'll report back. But here we go. It's a nice, freshly machined cone. Very good looking splines, so that'll solve the spline problem. You'll notice one small difference is that the original cones didn't have these 3 holes. They were just flat, and as I understand it, that was necessary for the machining of these cones, but if anything, it maybe allows a little more fluid to get in and around these cones, so it's probably not a bad thing. And so I have a pair of those, and we'll get those installed in the next video. We'll see how that goes. So then the other problem that BJ's has come up with a solution for is the vacuum shifter for the emergency drive. This is no longer available. This one is actually pretty good shape, but eventually when the diaphragm fails, this is just a sealed unit. There's no way to really repair the diaphragm, the vacuum diaphragm that I'm aware of anyway. And so what they did is worked with another manufacturer to come up with this replacement unit. It's a little bit different, it's a little bit bigger, and you should be aware that if you want to buy one of these replacers, you do have to remove the rear yoke, and it says that on their website, but you might not see it. But this won't slide past the rear yoke, so you need to pull the rear yoke to install this. Otherwise, it's very straightforward, no big deal. I'll put a link to all these parts on the screen, and then also in the description of the video. And then what's neat about these is that they're actually rebuildable. So if you install one of these and you find down the road that you damage the diaphragm or there's some problem, then there it is, the diaphragm. And that's replaceable, apparently. This is brand new, so I haven't had to do that yet. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, so thanks BJ's for making this still a possibility, and let me clear these things aside, and we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, now let's just run through quickly a few more parts available from BJ's and a couple from other places. So first up is the thrust washer that rides on the main drive sprocket. That's a wear part that can get replaced. You can get these in a number of places, but including BJ's, so I'll put a link to that. And then next is the four-wheel drive switch or emergency drive switch that tells you that the emergency drive fork has shifted. And this one actually still works, but it's in the purposes of the video, of course, I'm trying to show everything that's possible to replace. So these are actually used in other transfer cases too, so they're not hard to find. But here's the one that BJ sells. I'll put a link to that. And then a few other small items. If you remember from part 2 of the series, there's little E-clips that secure the fork from sliding on this shaft. It actually goes on the other side here. There's 2 clips, one here and one here. Anyway, those are actually standard parts. So this is just a these happen to be stainless steel. It's just a 5/16 external retaining ring, and those are available in a number of places, but I'll give the McMaster part number. Up next then are the fill plug, the fluid draining plug, and the chain tension inspection plug. The fill plug is 3/4 NPT. I'll replace that with a stainless steel internal hex drive with a magnet. The drain plug is 1/2 inch NPT, same style plug. And then the chain inspection tool is 1/4 NPT. I'll replace that again with stainless NPT with a magnet. Up next then is the tent ball for the emergency drive. It rides in either of these 2 positions on the shifter. That's a standard part. Nothing special. Just a 1/4 inch ball bearing. You can get that any number of places. There's a couple that I got from McMaster, so here's that number. Then this is the speedometer cable adapter, and it has an internal seal. So the speedometer shaft goes through that seal like this. And this can leak. I have one leaking now. In the next step, I'll show you all the various kits that are available, including seal kits, and none of them include this seal. Before I bought the seal kit from BJ's, I asked if it was included. They said yes, but it isn't. So there it is, just a little tiny shaft seal. And I worked with a company, I believe it was in the UK, maybe France, to come up with a replacement for that. I don't recall the name of the company offhand. But at any rate, that fits nicely into the speedometer adapter. It's a little on the snug side, but it will go. And then I'll leave it sticking out a little there. And then the speedometer shaft goes through the center and fits nice and snug. So that should take care of that. And then finally, or next to last, this is the cover plate that goes over the emergency drive. And it's sealed with an O-ring on the back, and it has just a 1/8 inch NPT pipe thread to go to the case vent. I decided to make one out of stainless just to replace it. I really don't like painting things and doing all the prep work, so there it is, reproduced in stainless steel. and instead of this dinky little vent, I will replace it with a 1/8 inch NPT elbow in stainless to what's called swage lock connector, and then from the swage lock connector to just a hose nipple, 1/4 inch, and that's how I'll run my vent hose up into the fender well and put a filter on the end of that. And otherwise, I'll use stainless steel bolts to bolt the case together. I happen to have extra ARP bolts left over from other projects, so I found enough to put this case together. This is complete overkill. These are very strong, equivalent to grade 9 bolts, which is overkill for this project, but rather than buying new bolts, I'll use the ones I have. So. Okay, so next we have the 3 kits that I found for the Quadratrac. This is TSK 1305, or also sometimes called a BK 1305. You get these from transmission supply shops. I'll put a link for that. Here we have what's called overhaul kit TSK 200. Also available from various transmission supply shops. You might recognize this one from part 3 of the video series. There was a cork gasket for the PTO cover that I harvested out of this kit and used it. Otherwise it's as it comes. And then there's BJ's seal kit. So give me a minute, I'll get all these opened up and laid out, and we'll see what's in each one. So what I've just noticed is that in the 1305 kit, it comes with seals and bearings, but the seals are basically this crown part number seals, and if I compare the one from BJ's, it's basically the same crowned kit, so I expect those will be the same. Well, let's have a look. Okay, so here are all the kits laid out. On the top row we have the TSK or BK 1305, and then in the second row we have the TSK 200, and then in the bottom row is the BJ's kit. So we can see that they all come with a gasket that goes between the transfer case and the transmission tail housing. That's the same. And then for O-rings, they all contain the large O-ring that goes between the case halves, and they all contain the smaller O-ring that goes between the low range unit or the cover plate and the main case. And then 2 of the kits also contain the smaller gasket that goes under the E-drive cover plate. So as I expected, this BJ's kit is just the crown kit, which is the same as this one here, but the TSK 200 only gets the large case half O-ring, and then the reduction unit O-ring, but not the E-drive cover plate. And then moving on, we have the yoke or output shaft seals, which we saw earlier. Those come in the 1305. They don't come in the 200 case, and they of course then come in the BJ's kit. This O-ring is the O-ring that seals the emergency drive vacuum actuator to the case bore, so that's available in this kit and this kit of course, but not in the 200 kit. And then all 3 kits seem to have about the same seals, so the 2 small seals are for the transmission input shaft. These all seem to be roughly the same. And then they also include the output seals, or the seals for the output shafts, front and rear. These may be slightly different brands, there's no markings, but they're basically the same. Alright, so then that's it for the TSK 200 kit and the BJ's kit. Now the BK 1305 kit, you get some extras. You get one of those thrust washers we saw earlier, and then you also get the shoes that go on the shift fork, so the little plastic nylon shoes that help the fork shift the emergency drive mechanism smoothly. Mine are fine in this particular case, so no big deal, but I was curious if they're available. As far as I can tell, they're only available in this 1305 kit. And I called a couple of the places that supply the kit to see if there's any chance of getting just the shoes by themselves, but no luck on that. So if you know a source for these little nylon shoes separately from the kit, please put that in the comments. And then the 1305 kit also comes with some bearings. This is a Nachi 6306. This is for the main bearing that we saw in part 3 when we rebuilt the low range unit. So it's the main annular bearing there. This is seems to be a good quality Japanese made bearing, so I'll put this aside for another rebuild and use this. Then there are other bearings in the kit. We saw needle bearings earlier when I went through those. They're the ones from BJ's that are Koyo. So let's see then what we have here. So this is the large needle bearing. It is a Triton brand made in China. And it's the B-4416, of course, -OH. I'm not sure what that means. Anyway, I'm not familiar with that brand. I'll maybe check it out, but I think I will not use these. I'd rather have the Koyo bearings. Now let's look at the smaller diameter needle bearings that came with. And there are no markings of any kind on these, so I probably will not use these either. I mean, they feel okay, but I prefer to be able to at least look up the specs and see who made them and get an idea, hopefully an idea of the quality. So, and then the 4 needle thrust bearings are included. Of course, they are unpackaged and don't seem to have any markings either, so I probably wouldn't use those. I would just use the Koyo ones that I used in the in part 3 of the series, and these are the thrust bearings for the low range gear train. So I will keep this bearing, but the others I don't think I would use. Matter of fact, if any of you don't care about all that nonsense about name brands and specs and where they're made, or if you're on a tight budget and you just need some bearings, and any bearings better than no bearing, I'll ship these to you for free. Leave a comment, tell me your story why you need these bearings. If more than one person responds, then I'll pick my favorite, and if you do so, just shoot me an email at maladroitmechanic@gmail.com with your username so I can match up your comment, and if I pick yours, I'll ship these to you. Let's restrict that to people in the United States so I don't end up paying to ship these to Australia or something. So if you live in the US and you want these particular bearings, tell me why you need them, and I'll ship them to you if I pick yours. Comment is my favorite. So, anyway, there's that. Alright, so that's then the end of the kits. There's only a couple other small things I want to cover in this video, and we'll wrap it up, so I'll be right back. Okay, one more small thing. In part 3 of the series, I gave a McMaster part number for replacing the taper pin that holds in the low-range shifter shaft. I didn't have one at the time, so I reused this old one, but I was just curious. I wanted to make sure the part number that I gave actually works. So I bought a few of those from McMaster in stainless. There's the old on the left and the new stainless one on the right. Anyway, what I have installed there is one of those stainless ones, and it fits perfectly. No problem at all. And then just one last note about some some other small differences I've noticed in some of these cases. Most of the cases will look like this, a recess I showed you earlier for the bearing and the snap ring, but some of the cases are a little different. Here's an example of a different one. You can see that it looks a bit different. So what you have here is an O-ring groove, I think. I've never seen the O-ring in there, except for I did find one image online that has a O-ring sitting in this groove. So I'm not sure what that's about, or what that O-ring is. I'd like to get my hands on one to measure it. I'm not sure exactly what the difference is and why there's no O-ring groove in some of these cases and then no O-ring groove in others. Anyway, if you know the answer to that, please drop that in the comments. And then that's pretty much it. There's one more thing I want to cover. Earlier I mentioned that if you go away from a full-time four-wheel drive case like a Quadratrac into a part-time four-wheel drive, that you need to install lockout hubs on your front axle. So I'll show you how it works with a Quadratrac. It's different than you're used to with your lock-in and lockout hubs. Okay, so here we are looking at one of the front hubs on the front axle, and you notice there's no typical four-wheel drive lockout. So those lockouts will normally bolt with these 6 bolts on here, and then stick out a few inches, and you have that dial to turn to lock in the axles. So this is just a dust cover for the drive plate, and you can see this drive plate's very simple, and just a plate that bolts in place where you would have your lockouts, and then the axle stub shaft comes all the way through. The drive plate is splined to match the stub shaft, so that's splined, and then it's captured with a snap ring. So in this case, then your hubs are always engaged, so you're full-time four-wheel drive. So anyway, that's the way the Quadratrac works in terms of the axles. Now, the two comments I always get about this is, well, that must kill your gas mileage, and you must get a lot of wear on your front differential. So I've been actually driving for a couple weeks without my front drive shaft attached to kind of see if there's any validity to the gas mileage issue. I'll have to say, as far as I can tell, there's, after a couple weeks of driving, there's basically no difference whatsoever. Now, I have an old AMC V8 and a Turbo 400 that are not efficient anyway, so maybe that's why I don't notice it. But anyway, gas mileage is the same with or without the front drive shaft engaged, or the front axle engaged. And then as far as the wearing of the front diff, I don't know. That's a little insane to me. I don't worry about my rear diff wearing out. I figure the front diff will wear at the same rate, or maybe even less, since you divide the load over 2 differentials all the time. Anyway, I don't know. Not something I worry about, and probably wouldn't recommend you worry about it either. Anyway, that's it for this video. The next one, we'll finally get this case put back together with our new custom bearings, and that might be finally the end of this series. Anyway, thanks for watching.